Louisiana is the first state to require that the Ten
not expect
Commandments
that
be
voice.
displayed in every public school
He's
classroom.
against at least one of the
Republican
commandments.
Governor Jeff Landry signed the bill into law today. The legislation, written by Republicans, mandates that every public classroom, from kindergarten to college, must have a poster-sized display of the commandments in a, quote, large, easily readable font.
We know beyond any shadow of a doubt that the left is, of course, predictably bitching.
Opponents say it's unconstitutional, that it's an egregious melding of church and state.
The ACLU says it is suing the state of Louisiana over its new law requiring the Ten Commandments be displayed in public schools.
We are the most divided country since the Civil War. Do we really now want to divide between religions? This is Judeo-Christian. It's not Muslim, it's not Hindu, it's not Buddhist. It establishes a religion.
If parents want their children to learn religion, they need to go to send them to private schools or send them to Sunday school.
One of the dumbest waste of time I've ever seen in my life.
Wednesday, Louisiana became
Let's talk about
the first state to require the Ten Commandments and that they be displayed there in some public classrooms.
Louisiana is the first state to require that
I
the
did
Ten
not expect
Commandments
that
be
voice.
displayed in every public school
He's
classroom.
against at least one of the
Republican
commandments.
Governor Jeff Landry signed the bill into law today. The legislation, written by Republicans, mandates that every public classroom, from kindergarten to college, must have a poster-sized display of the commandments in a, quote, large, easily readable font.
All right. Now, before we get to your opinions, and I would love to hear your opinion below, we're going to get into this idea of separation of church and state and the misinterpretations therein. We all know that regardless of civil discourse that can take place between people on the right, ranging from libertarian to mostly conservative, we're pretty close on a lot of things. We know beyond any shadow of a doubt that the left is, of course, predictably bitching.
Opponents say it's unconstitutional, that it's an egregious melding of church and state.
The ACLU says it is suing the state of Louisiana over its new law requiring the Ten Commandments be displayed in public schools.
We are the most divided country since the Civil War. Do we really now want to divide between religions? This is Judeo-Christian. It's not Muslim, it's not Hindu, it's not Buddhist. It establishes a religion.
If parents want their children to learn religion, they need to go to send them to private schools or send them to Sunday school.
One of the dumbest waste of time I've ever seen in my life.
Why does that man look like he's just changed at a golf locker? What kind of accent is that?
Shuffleboard's next on his calendar.
That's the biggest waste of time I've ever had in my life. Ten Commandments, don't waste my time.
Looks like a character. He doesn't sound like a character in an Adam Sandler movie.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like a water boy coach or something.
Yeah. I can't take this country seriously anymore. Just look at my champion sweatshirt and my baseball cap and face that looks like death. So here's the thing. I understand where people are coming from, and people will point to separation of church and state, separation of church and state. Grab a constitution, find it. I know what you're talking about when you're talking about the First Amendment, right? And a lot of people just reference the First Amendment as freedom of speech, but that is where we see this idea, which is very important, of prohibiting some kind of a state-sponsored or mandated church.
Right.
The First Amendment was designed to keep the government out of the church-running business, like the Church of England, which they fled, or, of course, the California Church of fatter gay saints. That's one that, oh, gosh, that's what you do with our land?
It used to be such a pretty clear country.
It did. And then this.
Gosh.
We used to scalp them. So, the idea of separation of church and state is not to prevent people from being religious, and it's not to even prevent the idea of Judeo-Christian values, as we well know, from being the backbone of the laws that we have. That's how our laws were created. Citizens cannot be compelled to religion, okay? But people's personal faith are actually necessary. They're fundamental to how we will create laws, because that happens everywhere. Our founding fathers understood that your fundamental principles are going to be reflected in the laws of your country. And I know what you're going to say. Oh, yeah, Benjamin Franklin, they were deists. Let's look at the founding fathers here. And we have all references available at louderwithcrowder.com. Benjamin Franklin, okay, the deist, as most people would say, wasn't a Christian. He was the one who recommended prayer during the opening Constitutional Convention. He said, wait, hold on a second. Shouldn't we pray? Shouldn't we do that? Thomas Jefferson, the other deist that people point to, not really a Christian like you modern-day fundamentalists. You would consider him a right-wing radical Christian if you actually knew what he stood for. He confirmed freedom of worship, right? And he had this letter that he wrote, I've talked about this, to the Danbury Baptists, where they were very concerned about a state denomination. And he sent them a letter saying, no, don't worry. The separation of church and state is to guarantee that there is no Church of England. So you are free to practice any religion, and certainly any denomination that you want. It's not just the Constitution. It's not just when you look at the Bill of Rights. There are many, many corroborating auxiliary documents from these people, from their own hands, that clarify and provide context. And the more you add context, even without it, it's very clear if you read the First Amendment. You add more context, and it only undergirds that. And this is actually a letter from, let me read a quote from it, to the Danbury Baptists from Jefferson. Confining myself, therefore, to the duties of my station, which are merely temporal, be assured that your religious rights shall never be infringed by any act of mine and that. If you look at the Ten Commandments, of course they're reflective of the foundational principles.
Yeah.
You look at the Mayflower Compact, you look at the Declaration of Independence, you look at the Constitution. To act as though they share nothing in common or they weren't the basis of our laws is simply to deny history. You may not like it, but don't say that historically throughout this country, we have not allowed any displays of religious faith in public places. It's just not even close to true.
Right. And the guys who wrote about it, the guys who, were basically saying, hey, we're founding a country to make sure that we don't have the same kind of religious persecution that we had in England. In large part, that's why most people came here early on. They did things that showed us exactly what they thought and what they meant with what they wrote. Look at their actions. Right. And it's not limited to one or two guys that were the early leaders of this country saying, hey, this is okay. They issued proclamations for prayer when they wanted to pray about the war. And then when victorious and battles were won and victories were celebrated, they actually issued days like Thanksgiving proclamations as well. It wasn't just for Thanksgiving Day like we know it. Like this was all throughout, and we're running away from our history. We are a Christian nation. We were founded as such. I don't want a theocracy. Nobody here is advocating for that. But to say that you have to disconnect anything religious from government life or from something that is so fundamentally who we are, like you cannot separate our founding from God, period. Can't be done. Otherwise, it doesn't come from anywhere. Right? You would have to completely scrap the entire system.
And you know what? The fact that it's a Christian nation is wonderful for Jews, Muslims, Buddhists alike. I don't know if you know this. If you go to Islamic countries, they don't protect non-Muslims.
Right.
You're better off being here, but only under the umbrella of those Judeo-Christian principles. And how many people in your life or who you run into don't have an understanding of this concept, separation of church and state? Comment below. I've been talking about it for a very long time, but it seems to keep coming up. And that's an issue that we can. Yeah.
Steven?
Yes. Thank you for the coffee. I already thanked you, Sam.
No, that's the problem. I've been watching today's program, and I must say this is quite offensive and disrespectful towards Native American people in this country.
No, it's not. We're appreciating them.
Either way, this is wrong, and I'm going to have to take the coffee back.
Sam, you're taking that back? Do you know what that makes you?
What?
An Indian giver, Sam.
Yep.
That's what it makes.
Oh my gosh. Over here, we've got a regular Sacagawea.
Because you're a girl.
Yes.
Indian giver.
Yes.
This is not appropriate.
Get out. Get out.
All of you, my office after work.
Oh, you suck.
Leave the coffee.
Go hang out with Lewis and Dork.
Indian giver.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Dude, what am I?
Oh, jeez.
I gotta put the fire water down. Dude.
Where did you get another fire water?
Hey, this thing's got cup holders.
All right, let's just keep going. Send in your costumes.
Lots of cup holder space, lots of room in the back seat, leg room, but all for the kids.
Send in your costumes and, let's see if you can do any worse than this. And by that, I mean more appreciative than this. Captain Morgan, how about right now, really quickly, you plug the merch shop while I put on a shirt.
You're going to put a jacket on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This gimmick has run its course.
We're going to sell a shirt that's just do the go-along shot. Come on. You got to give the man his due.
Get him.
Man his due. Come on. He wants it. If you like what you see, obviously, go to CrowderShop.com and you get a full-body suit of Steven you can wear.
No Cherokee had cheeks like that, I'm telling you, dude.
That's right. That's Buffalo Bill for you. Go to CrowderShop.com. You will not find any of the outfits that we are wearing today there. You'll find actually really cool merch, so make sure you go support us there. You got a jacket on now? Did I cover you long enough?
I looked less silly before.
Hey, can you buy merch?
It's like Steven Seagal banged Lloyd Christmas on the slopes.
Wonder banana. That sounds like a native song. It
does.
Oh, he
see
claims
people
he's
dancing
native.
around a
That's
fire.
convenient.
Wonder banana.
It's just a bunch of dudes, no chicks in sight.
Careful, and you make fun of me. Bad things happen.
No bad things. Your heart attack might be a bad thing.
My cholesterol, yeah.
A little high.
All right. I bet you look in there, you see clogged veins.
For people who don't know the reference, that was when Brandon Lee was shot on The Crow, and he said,
They called me, and they said, Brandon Lee was shot, he's dead. And I said, there was a projectile in that gun. They said, no, we're firing blanks. I said, people don't die from blanks, brother. If you check tomorrow, you'll see that there was a projectile in that gun. They called me the next morning. They said, you're amazing.
I gotta say, it doesn't really show as well from your camera angle, but from where I'm sitting, doing the Steven Seagal with that hair, it's perfect.
This is actually very similar to the jacket he wears in Fire Down Below, except his is Argyle because he's blending in a small town.
Yeah.
He's the worst.
No one will notice.
Yeah, no one will notice. I'm just one of you with my $200,000 retro truck and
Argyle frilly jacket.
I'm just like you, except I'm dangerous.
Like, hey, are you a Fed?
I've never heard that word in my life.
What are you talking about? Do feds run over puppies with tanks?
Yes.
Yes, I'm very well
Then yes.
Then yes, I am a Fed. Okay, I'm sorry. You can't, guys. You can't rev me up with Steven Seagal and expect me to not get mad.
I'm here for the ride.
I do want to ask a quick question before we go on to the next story because I don't want to interrupt once we do. But Josh, I know you probably had a little different opinion. Like I don't see a problem with the separation of church and state and having Louisiana state say, hey, we're going to have this display in classrooms.
Well, I think my belief is that in the First Amendment it says that no law should be made,
right?
Respecting the establishment of a religion, and the Ten Commandments is one of those things where like I could see that not being considered super religious, and I could see it being considered as the basis of our laws, the basis of society and a law-abiding society. But the first four commandments command you to have only one God.
Right.
And that's where I think that it kind of making it mandatory. You put it in your class. Here's the argument though. I don't think that we should be making laws that say you can't put it in your classroom.
Right.
Right. But to say that it has to be in every classroom, it feels like it could. I mean, if I was Jewish, it's the same God there. But if I was a different religion, right? If I was a different religion and I had to put that in my classroom, I think I would feel a certain way about it.
Yeah.
And so that's where I go with it, where they're making a law where it's every classroom has to have it. Seems like
actually, I mean, obviously Jews wouldn't have a problem with it. They're almost the originators of it. And then
Judeo-Christian, right.
And then even Islam, right? They claim to obviously respect the the prophets of old, the people of the book, and the people who would be offended by it, really probably wouldn't, because if you look at Hinduism and Buddhism, it's kind of subjective. I don't imagine that they would have a problem with the Ten Commandments in there. So really, we're just dealing with Satanists, and I say screw them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I understand it too, but it's you're not compelling any kind of behavior either, right? And that was the argument used in school prayer, where you're kind of compelling behavior because it was an optional prayer, and then people would have a problem with it. I really do think that what we've done is ceded so much ground where it's like, yeah, we're going to have pride flags, we're going to have this kind of cult in our classroom, and we're going to teach our kids all these very terrible cultural things that we disagree with, but we cannot, under any circumstances, acknowledge how this country was founded at the very least, or that there might be a God. And I think that is a very, very, but how do you acknowledge it then? Right? I mean, do every one of these people, is the ACLU that's suing the Louisiana right now, are they going to stop using currency? Because it does say in God we trust on our currency. I mean, where is the line for these things? It just seems like a big show. And I'm like, look, we made a mistake. We made a mistake a long time ago. We made a mistake a long time ago ceding this ground. Our kids need to know about how this country was founded, what the founders believed, and the divine hand of God that allowed it to be so. And then they can make a decision on what they believe. Nobody's saying you have to believe it. But to not teach it at all is something that I just think is absolutely moronic for the culture that we want. And look at the results. Once we pulled God out of the classroom, things were headed in the wrong direction. They went 10 times faster once we did that. I just think it's a mistake, and I understand you want to protect people. You want to make sure you're not establishing a religion like the Church of England. We can do both. You know how I know? Because the guys that wrote it did both. Yeah. They wrote the protection, And then they had actions that said, no, of course that action.
I understand Josh's position, and the issue is we don't treat, for example, progressivism and leftism like the religion that it is.
Correct.
It is secularism, and it is effectively a religion based or predicated on the rejection of God. That's really what we're dealing with right now. In other words, if you want to say that the idea of teaching children that they can be any gender that they want or take mind-altering cross-sex hormones at the age of 6, that is a religious belief because it's not based in science. And it's just like Satanism. And I do mean this. When I say Satanism, by the way, I don't mean... sorry, one second. I have a hiccup. Oh, it's the firewater.
It is. You want some more? I got plenty over here.
No. When I say Satanism, I don't mean that people are drinking children's blood and spirit cooking behind closed doors. What I mean when I say Satanism, if you look at actual LaVeyan Satanism, they don't even believe in God, right? They say that if you're going to use this allegory, if you're going to use this fable, then they side with Satan. Why? Because they don't want to serve a God who tells you to love your enemies, or who tells you to control your emotions, or who tells you to be meek and submissive to God. They say, hey, that's a God who hates you. You should do things that bring you pleasure. That's what Satanism is. It's a rejection of the ideals of God. Take away the name Satanism, and that's exactly what there is no men. There are no men and women.
Yeah.
They're fundamentally interchangeable. There is no sexual responsibility. There is no duty to be responsible or accountable for your own life, your own decisions, your own finances. There is no salvation. And hey, by the way, you are all perfect and beautiful the way you are. That is a rejection of every single, well, those ones, I should say, are a rejection of fundamentally godly principles that were the basis of this country. And that's why we are where we are. So we do have to look at them both and say, let's put these on equal footing. Leftism, progressivism, is a religion.
Yeah.
They're still making sacrifices. That's what abortion is. It's a sacrifice at the altar of self.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. And when you're talking about a party that supports abortion up until and including birth, period, and even after birth in some instances like Virginia or states like California, Colorado, if they had their way, we're no longer talking about a life. It is human sacrifice at the altar of self. And I think the reason for this, if people may think it's an overcorrection, and you can comment below, it's necessary at this point because we've been acting as though all of these other ideals, these values that are corrosive, that have seeped in, that they're not somehow religious because these people claim that they're not religious. But they are dogmatic, and they do subscribe to a doctrine. It's the doctrine of me, 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 me.
And, you know, not to be exclusive, but none of those other religions or ideas or tenets of belief had any impact on the founding of this country.
No.
So when you're talking about the founding of this country, I'm sorry, but we didn't look to Islam to find out how to arrange society. We didn't look to Hinduism. We didn't look to Buddhism or Taoism or any of these other things. We looked to Christianity and we looked to Judaism. When you look at the Old Testament, we looked to Judeo-Christian principles to found this country.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree. I do agree that we should, we got to keep reminders of how this country was formed and what the ideas were behind it and all that. But I do think it's important to remember that people were escaping religious persecution.
Right, and there's no persecution by having a post.
If we're gonna stick to the things that started this country and stuff, there's some, it's backed up by Christianity, Judeo-Christianity, but it's also I would support a law or a bill that made the Bill of Rights or the Declaration of Independence, both of them, be put in classrams.
Yeah.
See, that's a different thing. I think if you could teach those, I think that's more important, honestly. I mean, nobody's teaching these kids these. If you ask any kid what if you asked yesterday, what the 19th Amendment was to a bunch of, nobody's gonna know.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. I would actually agree with that point, that I think that those should be mandatory.
I think those
the Pledge
should
of
be as well,
Allegiance
and
should, understanding the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. You know who knows those things? Usually people who have immigrated to this country legally because they've had to go through a citizenship test. You'd be surprised as to what a lot of those people know. And that's why they end up becoming law-abiding citizens, not to be confused with illegal immigrants or El Chapo.
And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of kids that grow up thinking that everything's against them.
Mm-hmm.
That everything's racist, everything's against them. You have the Bill of Rights and the Constitution up in the classrooms every day. They can look at it. They get to see it. They get to look for it themselves. Wow, I guess I can do that. I can do this. I can do that. I can.
Except they have a bunch of public school teachers saying, well, you can't because those are written by white men and they actually don't apply to you and it's systemically racist. And you're like, oh, skunked
Slave
again.
holder.
Well, they'll say the same thing about the Ten Commandments.
They'll say the same thing about everything. They'll say the same thing about someone who happens to have a penis, who's a man, by the way.
Well,
yeah.
Chief she, who was a he?
Yes. I don't know what that means.
watch Louder with Crowder live Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern.